Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Hidden Mysteries, and I'm Mimi, one of your co-hosts for this evening. And joining me is Reverend Maria DeAndrea, and this is July 2nd, 2014, and we're coming to you from New York. If you've ever wondered whether there was more to this world or what we see, then you're in the right place. On each show, Reverend Maria and I will explore an array of unusual topics and endeavor to seek out answers to mysterious concepts and age-old legends. Hi, Maria. How you doing?
Fine. How are you doing today? So beautiful
good.
Out.
Yeah, I know. We're having a thunderstorm about to hit us. Our telephones weren't working correctly, so you would have the static, so we had to switch to our cell phone. So bear with us. I'm hoping everything's going to be okay audio-wise. In the meantime, we just give, in case anybody didn't see or listen, rather, to our first show. If you missed our very first show, Reverend Maria is an internationally known psychic from Budapest, Hungary, and a European shaman. She's also a published author, spiritual life coach, metaphysical practitioner, and public speaker and lecturer. And you can check out Maria's website at mariadeandrea.com or use the links below our show's description here on Blog Talk to Maria's website, as well as the books she has authored. I have personally researched topics on the paranormal spirituality for many years and produced a local cable show for 14 years on this very subject, plus having experienced quite a few psychic occurrences of my own over the years. And my website has just been launched. I mean, we have more work to do on it, but you can go to MQuestMedia.com. You can check out some events that we're going to be presenting very shortly. And that's going to be an ongoing project, as well as putting together a newsletter and a blog as well. So that's all just in, progression right now. If anyone would like to join our chat room, it is open, and I will relay any questions or comments anyone may have to Maria. And if anyone would like to call in and ask a question in regards to our topic for this evening, you can call us in 929-477-1080. But only questions on today's topic. If you wish to speak with Reverend Maria on any other issue, please call her after the show at her number 631-559-1248. And I'll repeat that again later on. So now on to our today's topic, spirit cleansing, or as we sometimes like to call it, ghost busting. So Maria, who you got to call, huh? Hello? I needed that little speech. Okay.
You got to love that, right? You have to have a sense of humor.
I know. I had to put that in. So let's talk about what we need to do if we find ourselves in a situation where we have a ghostly roommate who keeps you up at night and unfortunately does not know how to pay their half of the rent. What are the telltale signs that you have a ghostly visitor?
Okay. First of all, before I forget, I would like to say how you and I are really happy about the positive responses that we've already had about our last show. So yeah. I just thought that was wonderful, and we really do appreciate that. So to answer your question, while dealing with spirits, we are really working with the etheric space, okay? So the way to spot that there is a spirit in the house, as an example, would be objects moving around. It could be a feeling cold spots. Sometimes you'll hear knocking or footsteps or really other sounds. And sometimes we can get a glimpse of how they look. Okay? So spirits can actually be attached to a person or an object or sometimes a location.
Right. Now, of course, sometimes certain people have that ability to see, and some people may just be able to feel or to listen. So, how have you experienced a spiritual presence in your life?
Well, I find that I pick it up more frequently clairvoyantly or clairaudiently, which just means I'm either seeing them or hearing them. But many times it's more that I just know that they're in the room. So as an example, clairvoyantly, it can be that they look clear or transparent, or it's really funny. Sometimes I see them kind of like a fluffy mass. And I can see them sometimes peripherally, kind of like out of the corner of your eye, and really you're not seeing them with your physical eye. And I find many people sometimes get a glimpse; they just don't know what to connect it to.
Right. Personally, I sometimes have picked them up peripherally, so I will sometimes see like a fleeting movement on the side of my eye, and
exactly.
I turn around. Naturally, I don't see it, but thing was there. In fact, I just remembered a story that I had many years ago. I was over at somebody's house down in the village, and I was writing at their table. I think it was like a test I had to take for a teacher that I was having, and I had noticed, at the corner of my eye, a dog just walking by, and but I was with taking the test. I ignored it, and I figured, okay, later I'll say hi or whatever. So after the test, I'm sitting down with my teacher and a talk and everything, and just in mentioning, he made a side mention at the fact that he once had a dog and that he had passed away, and I was like a little floored because I could have sworn. Yeah, I could have sworn that I saw the dog. I mean, it was like seeing a dog passing by on the side of my eye. I mean, it was incredible. So it's really funny. That was very real. Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes you see them, and I know with me, especially when I'm not looking for it, like, we do house cleansing and literally ghost busting, but if I'm not expecting it and say, like in your situation, it really looks physically so real that it takes you a second to realize which reality it's in, like you had.
Yeah, and then there are times when I'll just feel or sense like somebody's walking into my personal space. You can feel like somebody's sort of
in your energy
interrupting.
Field.
What's that?
In your energy field, we'll feel it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So there are times when I will feel that as well, or I'll sometimes get like a little prickly thing on the back of my neck. But those have been my telltale signs. Now, they can be interdimensional or earthbound spirits, as I believe you mentioned on an occasion, that sometimes they may not be aware that they may not be aware of what's happened as they've passed. Perhaps like an accident or something like that has shocked them.
Exactly.
In their passing, as it has created that passing, they're shocked, they're disoriented. What exactly happens to them in that particular situation when they're they feel totally lost, they're dazed and confused,
Okay. Well, when you're dealing with a transitional situation, which is really what they're going through many times, okay? So when they're kind of in the transition state or the afterlife regions, and they can be confused. Sometimes they're puzzled. Sometimes they're dazed, because they're going through the transition and they may not be aware of it. So sometimes I find that some people pass away, they wake up and they go, oh, I know where I am. And then sometimes you have the other people, like I said, that are very confused, especially, like you say, when they go all of a sudden, such as, I don't know, getting run over by a car, you're not going to expect it. Okay? And they can actually get stuck in a place, because they're attached to it. So sometimes we make a conscious effort to help them, so that we can help them to move on. And this is a really funny story. I think I've mentioned it to you before. I was living in Mineola for a while, and, in Long Island, and I had a basement, and when I first moved in, there were two spirits in the basement. So one of them, it's really funny, was this heavy-set lady, and she was dazed, and she was confused, and she was from a totally different time period. It looked more like colonial times. And she really didn't know where she was. So I explained it to her. There's techniques and things that we do to help them move on, and she was really happy to move on. Then there was another spirit that was from the Prohibition time, and the first thing I felt with this gentleman was he was really funny. He said to me, that he noticed that the lady was gone, and I said, I hope you're not going to miss her, kidding around. And he says, no, she was very boring. I didn't like the fat lady. It was, because I would think you don't want to be in the basement or, by yourself for centuries. And he had a really good story. He was telling me, he said he did not want to move on. There was nothing I can do to move him, really, because, first of all, he was positive. So we didn't have a need to move him on. But he really wasn't ready to go because he said when he was alive, the way that he got killed was he was in a speakeasy. He had this young lady on his lap, and he said some other people came in because, remember, it's Prohibition. A different gang came in and killed everybody in the room, including him. So the first thing he wanted to know was if the young lady was okay and if she passed on to a positive place, because apparently it was somebody he truly cared about. Okay. And the other thing was he said he did not want to move on because he was part of a gang and he killed a lot of people before they killed him. So he was afraid to move on because he didn't know what was waiting for him because he led a negative life.
Well, he thought it was like a jailhouse. He's going to be punished, or there's going to be retribution. That was the problem. The poor guy. I mean, it sounded like a gangster rub out. That's what it sounded like.
Exactly. And I said to him, he felt really bad, and he was aware. It's a karmic situation where if somebody really regrets and feels bad about what they did, and they would never do it again, karmically, it helps them move on, to a more positive space, as long as they truly in their heart, feel, regret. So
right.
I wanted him to move on, but he just refused. Now, because he was a positive spirit, okay, I really didn't see a reason to force the situation, but it's really amazing. And the reason he was in Mineola was because apparently wherever the speakeasy was in that town, and he actually lived on those grounds. I don't know if it was in that house, but apparently he was on those grounds very frequently, so he attached to the location.
Wow.
And so and found that I went and I did the wash in the basement. I had a friend to talk to.
Aww. We hope you sold at least.
You would think that
helped you a
little bit.
So let me ask you, so what are the ABCs to clearing out your home? Where do you begin, and how do you recognize that you have, well, we already mentioned that how you recognize, but what do you do to get things going?
First of all, I have to tell you, I like the ABCs. That was really good.
So let me see. Simple,
I love it. Okay, so from that point, because we always have fun, even though the information's real, and that's serious, we still need to have a sense of humor. So from the ABC point of view, I thought that was great. So A, you have to determine whether there is a spirit, because sometimes people think that there's a spirit in the house, and many times there aren't. Okay, they're misunderstanding situations. Okay, so that would be A. B would be you need to know if it's a positive or negative spirit, because if it's positive, you don't actually have to do anything or move them on. If it's negative, then you really have to move them on, and I would suggest calling somebody that's professional with this, because if you're trying to move on a negative spirit, you don't know if it's a negative person that passed away. You don't know if it's a negative entity, which puts it in a different realm. So, you can actually get hurt emotionally or physically. And, I'm always saying when you're dealing with the spirit plane, it's like electricity. You don't see it, but you don't put your hand in the socket, And then C would be that we go in and we move them on or we detach them from the place. I like the ABCs.
Right.
That was good.
Well, I mean, when you said, if they're good, I would think like the only reason why that they would stay around is if they're, like we said, a little confused, and if you were to give them the information and let them know, look, you don't have to stay here, because sometimes they stick around because they just don't know that they can move on. They don't understand that. So I would think that, perhaps giving them the option, look, let them know, look, you don't have to stick here. You can go on to better planes,
Well, like I said, like with this gentleman, for lack of a better term, in the basement, he didn't really want to move because he was really worried about what was coming to him after. And then what people don't think about is there's something called an astral shell. Okay? So an astral shell basically means that the spirit left the shell of the body on the spiritual plane, so not visually, physical vision, spirit vision. So they left the shell on the spirit plane. that is basically embedded with their emotion. But the shell is still there. However, it's an imprint of the person's personality, and the soul already moved on. Okay. So there's so many different variables that people aren't aware of. They just think they're going to go over there and tell it to head towards the light. And like I said, you can really get hurt if it tends to be a negative entity. And then there are psychic vampires, which means basically there were people who were addicted, as an example, to alcohol or drugs when they passed away. So what they do is they still want that feeling, and they can't because they don't have a physical body. So they will attach themselves, kind of like a leech, to a living person that has an addiction problem, so they can feel that sense of getting high through the person. So if we get rid of that entity, that spirit, the person that it was attached to really needs to change their pattern and stop doing the drugs or the alcohol. Otherwise, it may come back to kind of feed on that energy because they didn't change, the energy that attracted them in the first place.
Right. And if you still maintain that need towards that addiction, it's going to draw them even closer to you, and it's going to be a lose-lose situation, So, yeah, that's a pretty difficult situation in itself.
Right, because it's 50-50 if they're going to come back or not. We can detach them, but they really need to change the pattern so they don't have a reason to come back.
Mm-hmm. Besides the story from the Mineola house, are there any other interesting ghost stories that you've had experiences with?
Oh, actually, there's a really funny one. Now, you know me enough, so you know this, and many of my students know this, and people that I do readings for. This was really funny. When I work on a very intense level, so say I'm doing readings for hours or metaphysical or, spirit house cleansing, when I'm working for a long time on the psychic side, because our brainwave actually shifts, what happens is that I cannot get in a car and drive after because it takes me a while to shift back to physical reality. Okay. Now, the way that I discovered this was somewhere around 2, 3 in the morning. I was driving on the highway. I just finished working. I was doing a fundraiser because I run some of them. And I'm driving back, and for lack of a better term, I'm psychically high. And I saw this Native American, right? I saw this Native American walking around the parkway, so I jammed on my brakes. Okay, luckily, because of the time of morning I was driving, there really wasn't anybody close behind me, because apparently nobody else saw the Native American. So I jammed on the brakes, and then it took me a second to go, oh, he's not physical. But what I noticed was he looked very clear to me. I really, for a split second, I thought it was somebody physical. But the car in front of me that was moving really quickly, okay, I had absolutely no sense of distance. So I saw the spirit, but I couldn't tell you how far the car was from me that was driving in front. So now I've learned, after I work psychically or, intuitively for a while, I don't get in the car and drive because I'm better on the other side.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because it's like, I guess you didn't see that caution sign for Native American crossing. I mean, did they have one? I mean, it's like they would have for a deer crossing, So that's funny. That's really funny. My goodness. Because, I know people,
like you said.
Yeah, I know people like in Staten Island because, Staten Island is a very paranormally active town. I mean, living here, you learn a lot about the paranormal. There are so many stories of people seeing, spirits just walking down the roads. Like, especially since this town was very active during the American Revolutionary period. So a lot of people around, let's say, like the Richmond Road area, have seen, especially the ones who are very psychic, have seen the spirits of soldiers walking down those roads as if it was back in their day in the American Revolution period. So it's really fascinating. I mean, it's like you could be walking down a road and if you see, my mother, who was very psychic as well, she could see spirits everywhere. I mean, she'd be walking down the street, she'd be like, in fact, even in our house, she had them. I mean, it's a really cute story. I have to tell you about this, but one night, my parents were trying to sleep, and my mother was hearing this commotion going on in the next room. So she gets out of bed. You know, my father was asleep evidently, so she gets out of bed. She goes into the room, and she told me about this later on. She said she saw like a group of people in different period garb just sitting around having a good time, like they were socializing and having a party. So my mother didn't really know what to say because, you know, she heard them and it was pretty loud. She at first thought it was like maybe like the homes next door to her because they're very close by. So she just looked at them. She said to them, she says, "Look, you know, we're trying to sleep here. Can you quiet down?" And then she just turned around and went back to bed. So she couldn't think of anything else to tell them, you know, because after all, you know, they're sitting there. What else are you going to say? You know, what else are you going to do? So I think they might have like quieted down a little after that whole situation. But you know, I mean, people who see them on a regular basis, it becomes so natural that it's like you're just talking to anybody alive, you know, because
right,
of that, you know.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's funny. I've been doing this all my life. And when I was in my teens, you know, and I used to talk to spirits and, you know, you pray and I, you know, would talk to deities, and talking to deities especially, I would do that where I'd be going, you know, thou art. Okay. A couple of years later, I was at the point where I'm going, yo. It's like, oh, come on, just fix this for me. I didn't go through the whole ritual thing. I went, just fix it now.
Yeah. Let's get this going already, you know?
Exactly.
You know, I have to mention. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as long as in your heart you're dealing out of respect, the terminology really doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly correct. I just had to mention, just as a side note, since it sort of comes around in the same vein of what we're talking about tonight. This past weekend, and if people have been going on Facebook, they know that I went this weekend to the Lizzie Borden House for an event that they had presented there for. It was presented by a couple of paranormal investigators, Chris Mancuso and Brian Cano, who do a show called Scared on TV. So they did an interesting event there. It was sort of like a triggering experiment that where we sort of did a retrial of the Lizzie Borden case, you know, to see if we can come up with our own, you know, understanding of what happened, you know, whether the outcome could be any different. And then later on, we did like a paranormal investigation of the house. And we came up with a lot of like EVPs that, you know, that we didn't expect. I mean, a lot of information like, you know, ghostly spiritual responses from the spirits, you know, who were in that house. So it was really an interesting, you know, experience. I mean, and the house they did such a nice job on the house. So, but it was just like so fascinating to be up close like that and to, I don't know, to be in the middle of that. You know, it was really, really interesting. So if anybody ever, you know, sees these two guys doing another event like that, either at the Lizzie Borden House or anywhere else, you know, it'd be it would be exciting to go if you want to, you know, check it out. So, but have you ever had to go, you know, have you ever gone to like a house that has had history where, you know, an event like that took place, you know, like murder perhaps?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, you know, especially when you're going somewhere where they have the museums and the old houses turned into museums. Okay. Anytime you go somewhere like that, or some of the burial grounds from, say, the Civil War, you know, you're going to see things walking around, and sometimes when they throw events, it's really funny. Sometimes you have spirits that people can see or sense, or they show up, and it's really funny. Sometimes when you have an event, they just all disappear. It's like a cosmic joke, or they're playing. You know? So it's kind of a different system.
While you guys are here, I'm leaving. Have a nice time, you know.
It's all with vacation now. We're on a break. And, you know, the other thing is that, you know, people don't realize that there are portals. There are energy vortexes or gateways to interdimensional situations, which include spirits and ghosts, but not limited to that. And I had a funny experience. I went to this lady's house, and she had a very strong vortex in her yard, and she wanted to know if it was going to be something that needs to be closed or if it's going to be a problem. And first of all, usually they're closed. You might feel the energy a little bit so you know what it is, but you really have to know what you're doing so that you can activate them. However, especially if there's one that's a little bit open, we really suggest that you pack up and relocate, because there's no way to move a portal. It's an interdimensional gateway, and they're not really as common as people think. So always way to the other side, but it's not really like that, and it's not that frequent. And usually I found when I hear about it, it's more in situations where it's in the desert, in a forest, somewhere where it's really not connected to where you're living. It just seems to work like that.
Well, I mean, my spiritual teacher, Alexandra, had, we'd always talk about these things where she mentioned that in pretty much, because, our world is not the physical world reality that we think we see, because this is just a story we give ourselves, in other words, it's almost like we're on the Enterprise and we're in a holographic suite. It's like when the program is on, we see all this, but when the program is off, there's nothing but, machinery behind the wall, behind the curtain, sort of, So that's my way of trying to explain it to people. But portals in various areas of, our homes and any place where we are, because it's not like they're attached to the home. They're basically attached to the fabric of our world, of our realm. So I feel like there is a way for them, if they need to get in and out. So in other words, everyone should be careful what they ask for because they don't want to bring in the wrong energy. I mean, I know you've mentioned that, and I know, like, if anybody watches Supernatural, because I'm a fan of that show, Dean did ask. Yeah, Dean did ask for any angel to help him. Now, that was the wrong thing to do. He should have asked for a specific angel to help him. Exactly. Who he knew would be helpful. He ended up in trouble. So let that be a tip to anybody. Don't just ask for anybody. Get your information correct. Get the right name. So what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, definitely what happens is a lot of people read books, and I don't mean it negatively. I'm a published author. I'm on Amazon, Kindle, whatnot, so I don't mean it negatively. But some people that are authors do very good research. They're wonderful. That doesn't mean they're in the field. And what happens is you might be calling in, say, a spirit because the book said that they're positive, and the book might be wrong. Now you called in a negative spirit and you're really stuck, and now you're going to have issues. Or like with the angels, people just call in angels in general. And I'm always saying, if you don't know a name, like you said, at least say you want a positive angel, because what people forget is there are fallen angels. So if you're calling in an angel, you don't know which side you're calling in. It just doesn't occur to people. Exactly. So we really have to be much more careful than people realize, because it is a very strong reality. And interdimensionally, there are so many different planes of existence. Physical, non-physical, and all on the etheric plane in various forms. So we have to be a little bit careful about who we're talking to.
Exactly. So, we're coming down to closing. Do you have a last statement that you would like to say for this evening?
Actually, you have to admit it's really funny, because this seemed to go so fast,
I know.
And I know we're going to be bringing a lot of different exciting issues and topics to everybody. And I just wanted to say that until the next time, and always, may God bless you abundantly. And thank you for listening to the show.
Yes, and thank you again for all of you listening. And please visit us on Facebook.com/MQuestMedia. You can reach out to Reverend Maria at mariadeandrea.com, or call her at 631-559-1248. So have a nice night, and thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next time on Hidden Mysteries. Good night.